Welcome to Consulting Mastery, where we help B2B consultants master the business of consulting. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Ahmed. Join us as we explore the art of delivering outstanding client value, earning a higher income, and thriving in today's marketplace. Have you ever had somebody that you really cared about, you respected their opinion, you wanted them to like you, and at some point they told you the truth about maybe a character trait or a flaw or something about you with the best of intentions that you just did not want to hear?
Of course.
I hope
And
that's
as
happened to everybody. I hope it's not just me.
Just you and me. Just the two of us.
I hope it's a normal part of the human existence.
I think it is. And I think the other thing that's a normal part of the human existence is how devastating it is in the moment. And then as time passes, how you realize it's one of the biggest gifts that you can receive.
And believe it or not, the topic of this podcast is not about your romantic relationships. It is about your marketing and your offer and your market, because the exact same thing happens quite often when you are tuned into what the market actually wants and needs. So the story here comes from an experience of one of our clients. This client is in the mobile gaming space. So specifically, they help mobile game developers monetize their games, make more money off their games per user. And this client has a successful, established consulting business, been running for years. I don't know how many exactly, but it's an established business in the 7-figure range. And they've done pretty well in a very specific segment of the market. And that segment is larger mobile games developers. I want to say 5 million plus, give or take, but that number may be off. But larger mobile game developers has been a good market for them historically. A lot of the revenue, most of the revenue has come from that market. And so when they started working with us, the first thing that we do with any client is we have the client and go out and conduct what we call customer listening interviews. And feel free to reference the episode where I interviewed our customer research coach, Anna Lasky, called How to Do Customer Research, goes over that in detail. So we have clients do that. And that's really the first month in our program. The 90-day pipeline is conducting the customer research, what we call customer listening, taking that data, taking that truth, so to speak, and using that data to inform which market to pursue, how to frame your offer, your positioning, your messaging, your packaging, so on and so forth. What this client found, much to their surprise, because they went after a market that was typically their bread and butter. But when they went and started talking to non-clients, and there's a bit of a danger here in talking to clients about these things, because clients are already working with you. They've already drank the Kool-Aid. They already know that you're great. Obviously, they're going to validate that they need you. When they went out and started talking to non-clients, to prospects who had no direct experience working with them before, they got a very different message. And the message was, we don't hire consultants for things like this anymore. This is not something that we hire for. And there's a longer story as to why that is. That market has shifted quite a bit. They now have more talent available to hire in-house to solve some of the problems that our client used to solve in the past. And there's a maturity model there that has essentially reduced the need of their ideal client to hire external consultants to solve some of those problems. So the market's matured. It's changed. And that's probably lesson number one from the story is, do not assume under any circumstances that because market A needs you today, that market A needs you forever, because markets are by nature dynamic and their needs will change. And now it's up to you to adapt to the change. But the point of the story and the lessons from which that we want to unpack today is, what do you do? This market's your bread and butter. It's what's paid the bills for years. And all of a sudden you're coming to this realization that they don't want you anymore. They don't need you anymore.
Well, and what's also interesting is it may not even be that a market that has paid your bills for years. It could be the new offer, right? The new market that you're chasing, the new idea that you have, the new solution that you're taking out into the world. And, I don't know if it's equally as traumatizing, but it's a tough message to hear that as well, right? The thing that you thought you were going to take out into the world and the problem you thought you were going to solve, to find out that people either don't want it or won't or can't pay for it or are handling it a different way. It's tough. And what we see is that folks come at this in two different ways. One, which is much less productive and problematic. And, we'll talk about the problems it creates. And one which, really takes this as information that can multiply the success of your business. So the first group, and we see this, and, we're in a unique position to see this because folks come to us to clarify their offer. We have them go through this customer listening exercise, and they always learn something, right? Like, rarely, if ever, does somebody come in with their offer defined. They go to customer listening, they find out that they were 100% accurate and perfect all along, right? The question is, to what degree are you learning something different than you believed? So in some cases, it's simply tweaking language or making an adjustment. And in other cases, like the one you're talking about, it is, the big rethink, right? The existential crisis that comes with finding out that the market you thought was going to be your market may not be your market in the way that you thought it would. And so the first group just throws their hands up and says, well, I guess that's it, right? This didn't work. That sucks. I suck. This business isn't viable. Or maybe a subset of that market is, I don't believe what I've heard. I'm going to just keep fighting my way through, right? And, I think we'll talk in a moment about how difficult and challenging that will make your life. But then we have the second group, and this is the group we encourage everyone to be, right? Everyone that works with us, which is the group that really sees this as a scientific exercise, right? An experiment. And that walks in not with a belief, not with dogma, but with hypothesis. And they know that they're going out to get information that's either going to prove or disprove or adjust their hypothesis. And once they get that information, they're able to move forward in a way that is, better informed, more effective, more efficient. And now they're on their way. And so the real difference here is not what you learn, because people in both of those groups have received equally destabilizing information. The real trick here is, to your earlier point, what do you do? And even before what do you do, how do you think about it, right? How is it that you wrap your brain around it? How do you frame the fact that you're getting this information that challenges everything that you believe in?
Well, there's a couple of really interesting things that you said there that I want to just unpack for a minute here. And the first is, I think you're right. I think a lot of people confronted with that kind of information would and do have this moment where they go, well, this thing's not going to work. This business is not going to work. This business is unvalidated, invalidated. And I think that's even true for some of our clients. Now, we obviously help them work through that pretty quickly. They don't stay there very long, but I think that's a very natural reaction, which is highly irrational. And let's unpack why that is for a moment. You should not feel like your business relies on your current target market. And that's almost at face value in opposition to some of our other messages on this show and in our programs and in our philosophies, where we talk about, fall in love with your market, not your product. Fall in love with their needs, not your solution, right? Focus more on the customer and their problem and less on your expertise and your solution. And that's true. However, if you have rare and specialized expertise and you're serving a relatively large market, then if one segment of the market doesn't work, whether it used to work in the past or not, but if you come to the conclusion that this segment is not working for you, and if you've exhausted all the possibilities and how you can serve that client, which is a whole other conversation, then you just simply move on to the next market. I'll take myself as an example here. Now, we serve B2B consultants, and we typically serve B2B consultants, I would say 80%, 90% of them under $5 million. and the majority of those, under a couple of $1 million, anywhere from that to early stage getting started. And that's our market. That's our segment. We've served that market segment for years. And maybe that continues to work and maybe it doesn't. And if it doesn't at some point continue to work and we need to pivot, there's so many other segments for us to go into. We can go after larger consulting firms, more kind of like mid-size, $2 to $10 million. We can go after more enterprise level firms. If I really wanted to, I could take my experience in helping B2B consultants with their marketing and apply that to any other industry. I could be a marketer for SaaS businesses. I could be a marketer for e-commerce businesses. And the thing I'm trying to convey here to folks is your expertise is what's valuable. And as long as there are markets out there that need your expertise and for whom your expertise is relevant, you should never be out of options. If one market doesn't work for you anymore, that's okay. Move on to the next one. And I'm not saying to do that willy-nilly. There's certainly a value in sticking with a market, even if that means adjusting and adapting and pivoting your service offering, which I think we'll talk about today. But don't ever feel like if this market blows up, I'm out of the business. No, because your expertise likely is highly relevant and valuable in other markets as well.
And what it most often ends up looking like is, a 10 or 15 degree detour on either offer or market. And, this is why the notion of maintaining, composure and thinking your way through it is critical, because what you don't want to do is just blow it up, right? Throw the baby out with the bathwater, whatever phrase you want to insert here, and be starting from scratch. That's rarely, if ever, necessary. But what is necessary is looking with a critical eye at both the market and the offer, and doing that with the benefit of information. I think that's the thing I want to circle back to, because all of this comes from listening to the folks you want to work with, right? Or listening to the people in that general market. They are going to tell you. And, it should go without saying, but I'll say it out loud. Go into these conversations. Yes, you want to have your hypothesis, but most importantly, you need to be able to hear what people are saying to you, so that you don't, take their words and conveniently turn them into something that supports everything that you believe, right? You need to be able to truly, truly listen, and then be able to take those themes and map that back to reasonable adjustments, but always remembering that your expertise is the value, right? And there is a place for it and there is a format for it. What you're doing is just, massaging it into the specific offer that is most attractive to that specific market segment. So although it can feel completely, very dramatic at the time, in the end, once people have time to process, once they have time to work through what the solution is, once they have time after that first message to listen to more people, right? Maybe in this new market segment, maybe who have a slightly different problem, going through that exercise and then thoughtfully and methodically building that in to, your new positioning is, I'm not going to say not challenging, but not as devastating as it initially seems sometimes.
Yeah, you made, I don't know if you made an explicit reference to that of a scientist or you started using terminology like hypothesis, but whatever you said, my brain went towards this metaphor of the scientist in a lab, which I think is a brilliant metaphor for not only the market research process, but marketing and business development at large, frankly. A good scientist, I'm talking about a good one, lots of bad ones, okay? I don't know about lots, there are bad ones. A good scientist goes into an experiment with a hypothesis. It's part of the scientific process. You have to have a hypothesis. But they're not ideally emotionally tied to hypothesis. They're not hoping for it to be true. They're genuinely open to what the experiment produces in terms of evidence and findings and genuinely open to what those findings mean for the validation or the invalidation of their hypothesis. And I think it's a really, really powerful metaphor and frame for folks to use, again, when engaging in market research and, frankly, marketing at large. The scientists, when they have a hypothesis and they go through their experiment and they find that their hypothesis was invalid, does not then question their ability as a scientist, does not question their identity as a scientist, does not question, well, because my hypothesis was invalidated, I am now a lousy scientist. I shouldn't even be doing this. No, because they're not seeking to validate a hypothesis. They're seeking the truth. They're seeking the facts. They're seeking to meet reality. And that's how, we teach our clients to conduct customer research. You can have a hypothesis, that's okay, but don't seek to validate it. Seek the truth. Because once you get the truth, however inconvenient it may be, now we can do something with it. We can make decisions based on that. We can action a strategy around, the most objective version of reality that we can muster up, versus if you only hear what you want to hear, and then your confirmation bias makes you feel like your hypothesis is validated even though it really hasn't been. Boy, that's going to be a grind, right? And then this client in particular, what they've just saved themselves is potentially years of pain trying to sell into a market that fundamentally doesn't want to buy what they're selling. And I got to tell you, a lot of folks are doing that right now.
Yeah. And, I think I said at the beginning, and it's worth going back to this notion of feedback as a gift, right? And recognizing that getting more information is just that. And we've had a couple clients in the last month or so who have gone through this exact exercise, right? Who have gone through the trauma of finding out that the thing they thought they were just going to come in and sort of easily deploy needed to shift. But what they say to a person is, those customer listening interviews, those conversations I had that essentially felt like a punch in the face initially, those were the most valuable experiences that I went through. And the faster that you can get to a place where you don't see it as good or bad, right or wrong, you see it as information, as data, as something that is either going to, prove or disprove your hypothesis, the faster you can get there, the faster you're going to be successful.
So let's talk about what this client actually did. And then there's a few lessons to unpack from their next steps in the process. So here's what they actually did. And obviously we coached them through this, and there was an interaction between our team and them in making these decisions. But ultimately they said, well, that's unfortunate. We were certainly hoping that this market would continue to throw money at us. The writing's on the wall. I'm glad we figured this out now, instead of investing more time and energy into selling to this market. And there's an important lesson there, because had they continued just selling to that market without engaging in a robust customer research framework and process, they would have struggled to close deals. They would have had a very low conversion rate. They would have had a lot of fee pressure, and they wouldn't necessarily know why, because you don't get that kind of feedback in the sales process. Often you lose the deal or you win the deal, and you don't really know why either way. The customer research gave them that qualitative feedback that helped them understand why that market's no longer a good fit for them. So they acknowledge that that's not going to be a path for them to go down anymore the way that they had been initially. And they made a couple of really important pivots. And these are the 10 to 15 to 20-day returns you're talking about. Pivot number one is they said, well, that market doesn't want what we've sold in the past. And this was my question to them. What do they need today? Right? Just because they don't need what you sold before doesn't mean they don't have any needs that you can address today. Yes, their needs have changed. How can your offer adjust and adapt to what they need today? And so the net of it was they were selling a very large consulting service in the past. And now what they're focused more on is more specific pieces of the offer that solve more specific and acute pain points, which once they solve for those, very well could lead into a larger offering and a larger engagement that might look a little bit different from what they did in the past. But the point is, it's not like the clients without pain points. They might not have the pain points that have led them to engage in a large consulting engagement in the past, but they still have pain points that are solvable by our client, and they're now pivoting to start to address those new specific acute pain points. That's the first thing. And the second was, maybe there's another segment within this market. Sure, we haven't historically served smaller companies in this market for a whole bunch of reasons. Maybe that's something we ought to look at now. Maybe we'll find that the market has matured sufficiently such that there are smaller players in the market today than there were 5 years ago that we could serve and still deliver a service to with a reasonable margin. And those are the two paths that they went down. Very much in the game. There's
Mhm.
no guaranteed home run here, but there's data and there's feedback that we received that we can make decisions on that can take us down more productive paths. And what we don't know, and what the hope is that these paths could be even more profitable and more lucrative than the path they were on before.